Hello, everyone. My name is James Heslington, and today I'll be doing a presentation on next gen miners, the involvement of young professionals in future mining projects. So, a quick overview of the agenda today. So, we'll start with a bit of a history, especially the reform, what's changed over the last century and a half. Go through the realities of the workforce, working arrangements, confronting barriers. Essentially, just discussing, what are the current trends, what are the working arrangements, who's doing what, and then understanding what is holding the talent back. Why is it changing? Career development, what young people, young professionals have to do to obviously progress in the sector. Support programs and sustainability, what's available, how we safeguarding the future, and then future trends. What does the next 10 years look like, in my personal opinion? At the end, if we have time, we'll just run through my personal pathway, essentially just show that it can actually work when applied properly, and then final considerations and closing remarks at the end. So some key things to look at here. Mining schools certainly have been around since the late 1800s. You can actually see over the 20 year period, some of the largest schools in the world for mining all were formed at roughly the same time. And that correlates, with technology and mining booms, the use of raw materials as needed. The UK was at the forefront of banning child labour up until really the 1900s. You could still work in the mines under the age of 13 until the Prohibition of Labour Underground Act. Again, follow with Canada, 11 years, and Nova Scotia was one of the last provinces, actually last areas mining wise, where young workers were still allowed to work in the mine. A lot of mining acts were formed in the 50s. No massive changes, certainly with safety, until the 80s. We saw a lot of big changes following the large disasters, not just really mining, but across multiple heavy industry sectors in the 80s. The 80s obviously saw a downturn in the UK. I think it's interesting and important to mention some of the UK interfaces, just because large mining sector previously, and obviously a bit of a downturn in the coming years. Global recession, 31.5% loss in Canadian mining revenue in 2008. Again, mining sector, we see booms, we see drops. So always important just to consider that, especially when it comes to future employment and young people in the sector. So workforce realities. Where are we now? So 6.7% unemployment rate in Canada, which is the lowest it's been for a long time. But despite that, the mining sector still has challenges with labour. It's hard to find workers, trades, professionals, and it's got an aging workforce. I do share a graph on the next slide, so we can dive into the details there. But it's interesting, you have this correlation between the mining sector and general employment, and it doesn't necessarily line up. And why is that happening? Well, obviously there is a negative public attitude in general. New workers to avoid it. It's the decline in mining courses. Universities are dropping off. Funding isn't there, so the availability isn't quite as simple as it used to be. Countries with lesser mining industries do struggle with that visual as well. It's hard when you don't have a prominent mining industry to promote that with workers. The other thing that's quite important to add is immigration and international recruitment, travel, more money, better experiences. How do you keep people in your country when there's opportunity throughout? It's easy to jump on a plane and in 20 hours you could be anywhere in the world. I think one important stat that did actually come out in the news the other day. So we actually lost 33,000 jobs in Canada in March alone. So again, that unemployment rate is definitely fluctuating. You can kind of see that gap, certainly in the mining sector. It's interesting. You can see a massive drop and a massive gap, that aging workforce that we're talking about. And this is obviously not just due to the aging workforce, but it's also due to a lesser young person input in the sector. And that really started, post-recession. So, working arrangements, what are people doing in the mining sector right now? Keyboard warriors or raised miners, two very different job roles straight away. So, there's been a lot of change in the mining sector in the last 10 years, last 20 years. And right now, technology increases are very fast. So, we see automated systems now, remote mining, the, the introduction of AI into the workforce. So inclusivity is really part of those discussions. How do we integrate those systems with the workforce, being inclusive whilst we can, making sure there's a nice spread of workers in the sector, not just talking about demographics, but also different job roles. With regards to different scope, some things really have changed the demographic though. And I've seen it myself. Things like the split feed jumbos. You've got a nice it's a new cab, you've got aircon, you've got radio. You know, I've personally seen people with very limited mining experience go on a simulator and obviously then onto a split feed. And after a few months, they're extremely proficient operators. They're previous gamers. They know how to use an Xbox or PlayStation, and yeah, they can use a split feed jumbo pretty well. What's the introduction of new roles, just in general support? You know, restrictions on budget, schedule. That's where those new roles come in. But also the support functions. You're not necessarily at the face, but just as important. Your finance, legal, environmental. The graduate programs in the mining sector, your classic mining engineering stream, it's cross-departmental roles. You spend a bit of time in ops, a bit of time in finance, and it's really important. It helps teach the younger professionals different sides of the business, future managers at the end of the day. The other thing that kind of ties into the different job roles is how you approach the work. Hybrid opportunities, work from home, flexi work. Obviously hard when you work on a mine site for that. I dream of being able to work from home, but at the same time, that is there for your support functions. And fly in, fly out. You get 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. It's very appealing to certain people, and to some people actually, it's very unappealing. So, what's actually holding talent back? What's stopping young people from progressing or maybe even coming into the sector? So, I think that it's fair to say the mining sector in general has quite an old way of working. It's certainly a bit less progressive than other sectors. You look at construction, for example, look at IT, very progressive, very futuristic. The pay gap is also very large. A professional role, certainly, talk about fresh graduates or fresh out of school even. You can go and work at the face on an hourly rate and do very well. But if you go become a young professional, it takes a while to build up that salary. And also, not just pay, but also education gaps. There's less mining courses. I'm not just talking university. I'm talking about your apprenticeships, talking about your college courses. So if there are less courses available, then number one, there's less people coming out straight away, but also there's less knowledge of what can be done. Burnout, unappealing hours, especially when you first start in the sector, you're doing 12-hour days minimum. You'll be expected to stay, you'll be expected to chip in. So the risk of burnout is very real. Fly in, fly out helps a bit with that, depending on what rotation you're on. But the second you're working at a site, Monday to Friday, you'll be pulling 12 hours every day with your 2 days off a week, throwing a bit of extracurricular activities on the weekends. And yeah, it's very, very hard sector to break into, I think. The other thing, mentioned it on the previous slide, but international work. The appeal is there. It's very easy for people now to go around the world. So you can jump on a plane, get a different visa, and go and work abroad. Solutions are key, though. It's very easy to talk about what barriers are in the way and what prevents things, but how do we actually solve some of these? So obviously, researching career pathways starts in school. Before even starting your apprenticeship or your college course, whatever it might be, discuss with colleagues, friends, professionals. It's very important just to understand what is available. And us as a sector, we're relatively good now at promoting the opportunities that are there. Same again with industry organisations, the mentoring opportunities, information packs. For example, CAM offer a very good mentoring scheme. In fact, most countries will have some kind of incentive now. So career development. How do you, as a young professional, push your career and ensure success? So the graduate programs, like I mentioned before, a lot of diversity. It's great. You see different sides of the business. You become a fully rounded person. Um, with regards to the industry and trends, obviously ESG, very, very important. It's at the forefront of all discussions right now, and green environmental initiatives. Us as a mining sector, we have a responsibility to ensure sustainability and environmentally conscious operations. So, as long as we are considering that in what we do, it helps ensure longevity for the sector, and it also helps remove some of that negative appeal. So, there are lots of other sectors that you can jump around as well. Mining is great. At the same time, there's a lot of complementary sectors. Construction, not just underground mining, but you have quarrying, mineral processing, land remediation. So again, gaining experience in different sectors and jumping back, it all helps build essentially your career, build your understanding, and different ways of solving problems. So general mining pathway is highlighted below. Through the junior phase, engineer, ultimately going more operational based than chief operating officer. You throw in, some project requirements there, you'll have project director and job roles like that. The beauty of the project is the ability to jump around and see more quite quickly. So support programs, what's available for people? So in Ontario is very good. The MOL modules ensure standardized training. It is obviously has a cost associated, but companies will usually pick that up with their employees. Um, and everyone is at a certain level. Depending on what tickets you have or modules you have, there's a standardization between X, Y, and Z. So it works very, 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 very well. Within Canada, there's certainly a vast acknowledgement. There's also national and provincial funding opportunities, which is great. Just to mention a few, CIM, Women in Mining, the Chamber of Commerce. That's multiple disciplines. You've got mining, you've got your tech services side, geology, commercial. Because of that, all you have to do is a quick Google search, and you can see how you as an individual can be supported by the wider sector. Mentoring bodies, also key. Mentioned them before. CAM has a great mentoring scheme, and also intercompanies, companies, universities. They'll have your apprenticeships. You'll be expected to. You'll be assigned somebody, and they'll be accepted to mentor you throughout your process. I have a number of mentees myself, and just help support, and because I was fortunate enough to have good mentors and still do, so I like to pass on that favour. It's an interesting graph here, to be honest. It shows the education level. And what I find quite interesting about this is it's actually relatively stable. We talk about dropping mining courses in universities and, a drop in apprenticeships and whatnot. But you can see here, yes, there is a fluctuation. But over the last 10 years, it's actually not crazy. Um, that being said, what this doesn't show is who's working in different sectors. And I think that's probably where the secret lies. Not everyone who goes and does a mining engineering course will go into the mine, specifically mining sector. They might go into a construction, civils basis. Same again with apprenticeships. There are different pathways throughout. So sustainability, how do we ensure a responsible and inclusive mining future? Ultimately, there's one of four things that people do a job for. It's either money, comfort, challenge, or ambition / growth. It could be one, Could be multiple. It all changes. So we really have to think about them when we have job roles for future and we're talking to people about that. Everyone plays a role. All of us play a role in ensuring we have a sustainable mining sector. We have a workforce available and we appeal as a sector to people. Future technology, AI, different job roles and involvement. I talked about the split fee jumbos earlier. The involvement in IT, finance, whatever it might be. These different job roles will attract different people and increase the diversity. It won't just be hardcore miners all the time. We'll have more diverse, interesting sector. A big thing here, though, I mentioned it before, fair pay and equal opportunities for all employees has to be met. Closing that pay gap, appealing not just on the face, but also in the office, in the technical roles, even in the support roles, and equal opportunities. I've mentioned women in mining. First Nations are key as well. Even looking at the age gap in general, is there a bias towards older workers with certain experience? These are all things we're all aware about it. There's plenty of presentations on that. These are things. Those are steps towards the future. So future trends, a 10-year outlook. What does it actually look like? So it's a changing sector. I've mentioned that. We're all aware of that. We will see changes in job roles. Future technology, autonomy ultimately will bring that. For myself, I had a vast experience to shaft sinking. Same thing, seeing a massive change there. We're moving towards mechanized sinking. It removes workers away from the face. So mining courses are being reduced. There's no point trying to sugarcoat that. But we're also seeing new courses come out. Future mining technologies, autonomy, sustainable mining, environmental courses. They still have the mining focus, but they just look at a different angle. So plenty of opportunities for people. More apprenticeships as well. It's a bit better in Canada, I'll be honest, but certainly for myself in the UK, there was a big decline in apprenticeships, and it started to pick up again. Universities are fantastic. Very important to go and get that schooling, but at the same time, the apprenticeships are valuable as well. Even the college courses. You can go and learn that trade, understand the inner workings, get the hands-on experience. You can study and then you can go to university at a later stage. You'll study in your own time. There's multiple ways of getting there. I think really the key point is making sure you have a well-rounded experience basis in the sector. That has to involve hands-on experience. It has to involve seeing different sides of the business as well. And again, we mentioned that diversity and inclusion piece. It's getting better, but it's a long journey, and the sector definitely is improving and needs to improve with that. So I think it's worth just briefly going over my personal pathway. It's a good inspiration for younger people. It's something I like to share. I had very good mentors, so I like to, as I said earlier, I like to pass that on. So I'm fortunate, Camborne School of Mines graduate, great networking opportunities and alumni. Anyone who goes to a mining school, it's a tight cohort. The places or the pubs that you'll bump into people around the world, it never ceases to amaze. I was very fortunate to have a great early experience. So lots of work experience as standard throughout my schooling. Every year, did work experience, and again focusing on different things: a bit of quarrying, a bit of underground mining, a bit of civil engineering as well. I had a very typical pathway: junior project engineer, project manager. I actually started as a shaft technician as well, so a bit more of that hands-on phase before going to project engineering. I may be biased, but for me, a project engineering role is fantastic. It gives you that full exposure, procurement, construction/operations, and then obviously the engineering is obviously more project focused as opposed to ops. I guess it's the stand of your production engineer, but it really does make a well-rounded individual. I've been, again, very fortunate to be quite involved in the sector. Mining Institute back in the UK, Mines Rescue as well. Because of that, I've done multiple presentations. I've won a couple of awards, and that's really helped, promote my career and also my understanding within the sector. So, some final considerations just to close off the meeting then. So, the ongoing mining education programs are vital. It's not just competency, but it's also exposure through conversations, through promotion. The rise of autonomy and new technology requires role adaptation. It's not necessarily going to change jobs or replace jobs, but jobs will have to be adapted to suit. It will benefit the sector ultimately. It enhances efficiency, increases productivity if used in the right way. It doesn't replace knowledge and experience, but it can help streamline certain aspects of that. We all have a responsibility. We have to promote the sector, positive, dynamic career choice, and share that with our friends, families, other people. These presentations, I think, are very important just to have that discussion, have that interface, instead of just getting caught up in your day-to-day work. You have to promote where you can. Experienced work should provide the mentorship. Again, mentoring opportunities are key. Wherever you can help, a young person, a young professional will always accept that help. And then finally, obviously key, equal opportunities for that will be sustainable mining in the future and ensures safeguarding of the sector. Perfect. So obviously just an overview of some of the references used. The MRHR is obviously an interesting website, lots of good resources there to look at some things discussed today. I want to thank you for listening to that. Obviously feel free to reach out to myself with any future questions or more discussion you want to have. Thank you.